This episode is brought to you by the European Coworking Assembly. We are everything Coworking Europe. If you head to the Coworking Assembly website, you can connect with our World Coworking, European Freelancers Week, Coworking Symposium, Coworking Library, and Coworking Tools.
Hello, folks, and welcome to this week's edition of the Co-working Values Podcast. I've got to get a better beginning than that. I am really excited today because we have Surya from Biwoc Rising, which is a co-working space in Berlin, but I'll let her explain to it. So what are you known for as Surya, and what would you like to be known for? And then tell us a little bit about your co-working space.
Yes, hello, everyone. My name is Surya. I'm the PR and social media manager at Biwoc Rising. And Biwoc Rising is Germany's and, I guess as far as we know, Europe's first intersectional work and social club. And we're located in the heart of Berlin-Kreuzberg. And our target group are trans, inter, and non-binary people, as well as women that identify as Black, Indigenous, or of color. This is why it's called Biwoc, because that's the acronym for those people. And as an intersectional feminist project, it is basically our mission to strengthen the social, economic, and professional participation of our people that are experiencing discrimination, or all sorts of discrimination, racism. I would say in our space, we unite and share perspectives and ideas and expertise. And we hope eventually that leads us to a greater prosperity and mobility and visibility. And basically intersectional justice, or like the concept of intersectionality, builds the foundation of all our doings, because we see it as a tool to dismantle the structures we live in, like patriarchal, colonialist, and capitalist power structures.
That sounds really easy. Can you explain so there's two things that just delighted to find your space. And I've got to point out, thank you very much to Caroline from Colour in Tech in Town Square in the UK for putting us in touch with you. So there's two things I want to explore. And one is it comes up repeatedly on this podcast, is the idea of a safe space. And I think that goes for a lot of people who might not think they need a safe space, but then there's a group of people who you're serving who having, I don't mean safe as in, no tigers and people with guns. I mean safe where people can be themselves and just relax and get on with what they need to do. And I'm sure there's bits you can add to that. And then about the intersectionality seems like a new and exciting term, but it's just one of the most under discussed terms, I feel, in the human race. So which one of those do you want to run with first?
Sure, we can start with the safer. We call it safer space, actually. So it started with safe space, like the concept of a safe space. But with time, people actually recognize and realize that a space cannot be 100% safe for everyone, especially if the group of people that are occupying the space is more heterogeneous than, like homogeneous group. So the concept of a safer space actually, it can be either a physical or virtual room. And it's, a room that makes people feel respected and safe. And it's about creating space for individuals where they can be, as free as it can get from discrimination, all sorts of oppression and just negative influences. So they basically try to be as inclusive as they can be and as supportive as they can be, and to try to honor like the privacy and dignity and personal boundaries of all people involved. And like I just said, safe, like an illusion, I guess, especially in a world where we live in. And in our co-working space, like I mentioned, we come together as people who all face some sort of racism and discrimination. But at the end of the day, we are all very different people. And just because you're discriminated doesn't mean you can, or then at the same time, you can also discriminate other people. So this is why we choose safer spaces as a term for us. And yeah, so basically to create this safer space, everyone that is involved needs to actively try to learn and unlearn and to take accountability. Yeah, and you can also try to develop like code of conduct or like a written form of rules. Might be a bit like a weird term for it, but like how do we want to come together and how do we want to create and have the space together to ensure that everyone feels respected, and yeah, that we also have something like a mechanism to go back to in case of any misconduct, I guess.
Yeah, I know what you mean. That with so Cobot, who are also based in Berlin, when we started running events with it, this is as far back as I think it was 2017 or 2016, and you can still, we'll put a link in the show notes, folks, is the event code of conduct. And it came about because Cobot said, if we're going to sponsor this event, we need to have a code of conduct. And it is to make everyone know what the ground rules are and make everyone feel safe. And it was things like, it was mainly around to use at conferences and events. And, quite often conferences are full of like loads of people drinking, and I don't drink and I don't feel comfortable being around lots of people doing hundreds and hundreds of shots. I actually, even as like a white cisgendered male, I feel like left out because, or pressured or something like that. And then as soon as this code of conduct came around, which basically said, just be respectful I won't go into details with it, but it was just be respectful of everyone's space and, what they're after. I felt this huge sense of relief, and that was just from a party. So if it's going to be a code of conduct that's agreed by the people I'm working with, I get a very delicious feeling hearing you describe how the community brings that together. Is that something you do once, or do you like review it every few months, or how does it keep alive?
Yeah, I was just about to mention that. So it's not only written by us as the team, but the community is actually involved in creating this piece of paper, because at the end of the day, we're not like the team is not capable of, handing out like a piece of paper and just like everyone behave and now it works. Everyone has to be on the same page and they have to come together and actually want to be part of it. So this is why we consider ourselves not only a co-working space, but rather a community space where people need to step up. And yeah, obviously things change and things like a code of conduct have to be reviewed and have to be worked on. And we have to check if everything is still hand in hand or goes hand in hand with our values and how we as a space and as a community have evolved. Because, for example, in the beginning, Biwoc Rising, as the name also puts out there, was intended to be only for women. This is why the Biwoc is in the name. And with time, we opened the space to the trans and non-binary and intersex community. So new people and new groups of people involved in our community space, and things like that have to be taken into consideration when we talk about how we want to behave and how we want to act and how we want to move together in this community space. As of right now, our member board, so since the beginning of this year, we have a member board from I think it's 7 people from our community that work together closely with our community builder and manager, and they basically represent our community, and together with our community manager, they are currently working on rewriting the code of conduct and rewriting policies. And in case anything happens, how do we want to act as a community? How do we want to address those things, and what kind of mechanisms do we have in place? So I'm really excited to see what they come up with, and I think they're going to be ready in the next few weeks. So I'm really looking forward to seeing how we as a community also evolve to see the old version and see how far have we come from the beginning, and how does our community evolve with time while also including new communities into our group.
Well, that's a really exciting thing to listen to, and I really appreciate the evolution of communities, because it's very easy to, like, slap a logo on the front of your co-working site and say, I see this when I walk around London, but in particular, I see slogans on co-working spaces, declaring a stance or position, and I don't very often hear stories of people going to into the detail of forming a community and what it stands for, like you folks have done. The other term I want to explore with you is that intersectionality term, because London's like Berlin is a very unique city. It's a very inclusive. It has its problems for sure, but it's a very inclusive and diverse city. And intersectionality is only a term I've come to understand in the last few years. And can you say how that plays out in I don't want to say workspace, but in a space like yours, and why acknowledging the intersectionality of people is important?
I think I can start with how the project came about, and then we can dive into the intersectionality aspect. So our CEO founder, Lubna Messaoudi, she came up with the idea in early 2019 after yet another racist experience with her last employer. She was basically fed up with white-dominated workplaces and just everything that comes with it. So while working on her own project, she was on the lookout for co-working spaces, and which is when she noticed that the new work culture was basically no different from what she has experienced before. And she simply felt that common co-working spaces in Berlin were not designed or didn't really acknowledge and recognize the struggles that people of color, and especially women back then and today also trans, inter, and non-binary people face. So many of the obstacles they face arise from the racist, sexist, classist systems we live in, and also especially in labor markets and workplaces across Europe, and including Berlin as a also diverse city, I guess. And the discourse of intersectionality is normally held in theory, and it's like this big word and people don't really know what it means, but it's also being thrown around and just used without really understanding what it means. So basically the concept of intersectionality describes the ways in which systems of oppression and systems of inequality based on race, ethnicity, gender, sexual orientation, disability, class, and everything else, religion, that all those forms of discrimination intersect and they create dynamics and they enforce each other, and they also I don't know the English term, but they reinforce each other. And this is why we can't just take one of those aspects. For example, myself as a woman, I experience sexism, but I'm also a Black woman, so I'm also being racialized, and you can't pull those two from one another. So everything has to be analyzed as a whole and in relation to each other. You can't tackle one of those problems without tackling the other. Basically, that is the concept of intersectionality. And with that, we want to achieve intersectional justice. And this means that we have an equal and fair distribution of everything you need in life, like rights, opportunities, political power. And this is why social rights and laws and everything have to really have this intersectional justice concept in mind in order to really reach everyone and really focus on the marginalized of the marginalized people. Because if we tackle their problems, then everything, or the world is a better world for everyone, I guess. That's how it works in theory, and hopefully also in practice. So Lubna wanted to basically take this theoretic thing and make it tangible somehow. So she wanted to, because we as marginalized people, we experience everything, all sorts of discrimination, and we need to take those experiences and put them or take them beyond the academic and the theoretical field, and actually have a space to practice empowerment and to develop and communicate strategies to recognize and reject those intersectional discriminations. And this requires an exchange within an intersectional feminist community, and this can only take place in a safer space. So this is how Biwoc Rising came about, and this is how the idea was formed. And also the other part is gentrification in Berlin. So the existing co-working spaces are a big part of the gentrification in Berlin. So I think we have about 130 co-working spaces in Berlin. And as I mentioned in the beginning, they are not accessible to our communities. They displace them, and they exclude us from co-working spaces, and they impede professional diversity and participation. So, for example, we have, I think, 2 other co-working spaces in Berlin that are directed at women. However, their concepts do not consider intersectionality, and they are rather homogeneous, like mainly directed at white, middle-class women. So this is why Biwoc Rising was created, and because it intervenes directly, and it creates a safer working space and an intersectional feminist network. Also, I can add that coming back to the classism aspect of it all, I mean, classism strongly affects people of color. We, as an NGO, we want our space to be accessible for everyone that needs it. So this is also a topic of how do we discuss like membership fees. So basically, we discuss them individually, and they range from like €0 to €50 per month, or whatever you can give, basically. Yeah, this is the concept of our space. We want everyone to have a place. Yeah, together we want to work on achieving intersectional justice for everyone.
That's great. That is probably the longest I haven't spoken on a podcast for years, that I was just listening intently as you laid it out, how it all works. And I know there's a lot of people listening to this that will go, yeah, that's what I mean. That's the bit I've been looking for. Or why don't we do things like that? Because, I am madly in love with co-working, and I've been around it for years and years and years, but it is, I'm going to say, I think it's unconsciously geared towards mainly white middle class men making startups, and then sometimes women are invited. And I do know that a lot of people that run spaces that look like that, if they sat down, they'd be like, oh my God, I didn't realize I was doing that. There's a thing called, like I'm a white bald-headed guy, and if I open a co-working space, unconsciously I would fill it with people that look like Moby and Seth Godin and Clay Shirky and other white bald-headed guys, because there's a phenomenon, if you like, called founder bias, where we just attract people like us. And I think I've heard it from different things, that a lot of co-working real estate is owned by white people, and that is one of the things that governs how those buildings evolve and who gets into them and stuff like that. So I think it's necessary and very brave what you folks are doing there. Is there anything, we will be back for another episode, but is there anything you'd like to leave us with as we head towards the closing credits of our podcast together?
It's just important to, like, I was listening to what you just said and realized it does not only, or you can translate that to every aspect in life, like people just not thinking about others and just thinking about who are my peers and who do I want to reach. And I think if everyone would just would look across I don't know, there's a German idiom, it says like looking across the border of your plate, like looking across from what you like, from what's right in front of you. And I think, just acknowledging that there are other groups of people out there and less privileged groups. And if you truly want to change something in your space or at your project, whatever you want to do, people always wonder, I mean, we want everyone to come. We want to be inclusive. We want to have like a diverse team or a diverse customer, whatever. You won't achieve that if you don't have people belonging to those marginalized groups at your decision-making table. Like, you have to include them in your planning, in your processes, in your structures, and they just have to be a part of it. And otherwise you will always wonder, like, how can we make it accessible for them, and how can we make them feel safe in our maybe like a predominantly white office? And why are those offices predominantly white? I mean, it all comes back to the systems and structures we live in. But at the end of the day, yeah, just be aware of those things and just do better, and just don't forget about other people just because it might not be your lived experience, I guess.
There's that, it's almost cliche in this kind of conversation nowadays, but there's that, I'm really trying to remember the person that said it, but there's a difference between an invite, there's a difference between an announcement and an invitation. So saying everybody's welcome to our, whatever it is, event is one thing, but going around and, deliberately inviting people one by one and saying, look, we'd really love you to be here is another thing. So just saying, oh, we're open for everyone is not enough. You have to go and, make sure people know they're invited. And that's something that I've learned to do in London with the help of other people, and, make sure people know they're invited. Where can we find you folks online? And we can put all the links in the show notes. And if there's anything you'd like us direct us to, just feel free to mention that.
Yes, so on Instagram, it's Biwoc Rising, BIWOC Rising. Also on LinkedIn and our homepage, biwoc-rising.org. Yeah, that's basically it. I think this is where you can find us and find out more about the work we're doing, about our workshops. We have our own podcast. It's called Our Realities. It's also linked in our link tree on Instagram. And yeah, I think that's where you get all the insight details.
That's great. I really appreciate your time and attention today. Thank you very much, folks, for listening in, and for your time and attention in listening to our conversation today. And if you go to coworkingassembly.eu, you can sign up to our weekly newsletter, which is this podcast, other events and blogs, and everything that's happening around the European Co-working Assembly ecosystem. Have a great day and be careful out there. It is a jungle.